The redesigned toxin test ran exactly as Hyunwoo had predicted. 3 subjects died when their bodies could not process the chemical compounds. 7 survived, though they would need weeks of medical treatment. It was a horrifying success. Tikresh was pleased. The lead researcher was impressed. Hyunwoo felt sick. He was given more freedom after that. A private workspace, access to the research network, even permission to visit Jiwon daily. The other test subjects watched him through the cell barriers with expressions ranging from hope to betrayal. He was becoming something between prisoner and collaborator, and he hated every moment of it, but he kept working. Because every test he redesigned meant fewer deaths. Because every safety protocol he implemented gave someone a better chance of survival. It was not forgiveness. It was just math. 2 weeks into his collaboration, Hyunwoo was deep in the research files when he found something that made his blood run cold. A classified folder buried in archived data, marked with security restrictions he should not have been able to access. But the Veltaran were careless about digital security, and he had learned their system's weaknesses. The folder contained communications between Tikuresh's research facility and high-ranking consortium military officials. Strategic planning documents, deployment schedules, weapons specifications. The assessments were not academic research. They were weapons development. The Veltarine Consortium was systematically identifying biological vulnerabilities in every spacefaring species they could capture. Heat tolerances, pressure thresholds, toxin susceptibilities. They were building a database of weaknesses to develop targeted biological weapons, and they had been specifically focusing on human subjects for the last month. Hyunwoo sat back in his chair, mind racing. Earth had refused a military alliance with the consortium 6 months ago. The Galactic Council had backed Earth's decision, stating that the consortium's territorial expansion violated several treaties. Now the consortium was preparing for war and humans were on their target list. He looked around the lab. The Veltaran researchers worked at their stations, mandibles clicking as they discussed experimental protocols. They thought he was helping them gather better data. They had no idea he now knew the real purpose. Hyunwoo carefully closed the classified folder and cleared his access logs. He needed time to think, time to plan. But first he needed to make sure he was not walking into a trap. That evening he visited Jiwon in her holding area. She was reading on a datapad, one of the small privileges she had been granted. When she saw his face, she immediately set it down. "What happened?" she asked quietly. "We need to talk, but not here." "The cells are monitored." Hyunwoo glanced at the camera in the corner. Then he pointed to his ear and mouthed medical bay. Jiwon nodded, understanding. She clutched her stomach and called for a guard, complaining of severe pain. The guard, accustomed to medical emergencies among test subjects, escorted both of them to the medical facility. The Veltaran medics examined Jiwon and found nothing wrong, but Hyunwoo had learned that their medical scans took approximately 6 minutes. 6 minutes in a room with equipment that created enough electromagnetic interference to mask conversation. "They are building weapons," Hyunwoo whispered as the medics worked. "All of this, the tests, the assessments, it is military research. They are planning to attack Earth and other worlds." Jiwon's face went pale. "Are you certain?" "I found the files. Deployment schedules, target analysis, everything. Humans are priority targets because we refused their alliance offer. We have to warn someone. Get a message out. How? We are prisoners on a heavily guarded research station in the middle of consortium space. Even if we could access a communications array, any transmission would be intercepted immediately." The medics finished their scan. One of them said Jiwon was fine, probably just stress-related pain. They were escorted back to the holding area, but the seed had been planted. Over the next few days, Hyunwoo and Jiwon worked out a plan using stolen moments and carefully coded conversations. They could not stop the consortium's weapons program, but they could sabotage it. Make the data unreliable. Introduce errors that would not be discovered until the weapons were deployed and failed. It was risky. If they were caught, they would be executed. But doing nothing meant Earth and dozens of other worlds would face biological warfare. Hyunwoo began his sabotage carefully. He introduced subtle errors into the test protocols, made equipment modifications that would work perfectly in controlled conditions, but fail in real-world deployment, adjusted formulas so that toxins would break down faster than expected. Every change was small enough to escape immediate notice, but significant enough to compromise The weapons development Tikresh noticed something was wrong after the fifth modified test produced unexpected results. The human survival rate is exceeding projections by significant margins. The correlation between stressor intensity and mortality has become inconsistent. Biological systems are complex, Hyunwoo said, keeping his voice neutral. Small variations in individual physiology can produce large variations in outcomes. That is why you need larger sample sizes. We have tested 47 humans across 12 assessment types. The sample size is adequate. Tikresh studied its datapad, yet the data shows patterns that do not match theoretical models. Explain this. Hyunwoo felt sweat forming on his back, but he kept his expression calm. Your theoretical models assume humans are physiologically average for carbon-based life forms. We are not. Human evolution was driven by extreme environmental variability on Earth. We are adapted for inconsistency. Your tests work on species that evolved in stable conditions, but humans are already optimized for chaos. It was complete nonsense, but it was nonsense that sounded scientific, and it gave Tikresh something to report to its superiors. The researcher accepted the explanation and moved on. 3 weeks into his sabotage campaign, Hyunwoo was reviewing another classified file when he discovered something that changed everything. A transmission from Consortium Military Command. They were planning a field test of their biological weapons in 2 months. The target was a human colony on the edge of settled space. 3,000 civilians. He could not let that happen. But he also could not stop it alone. That night he lay awake in his quarters, staring at the ceiling. Every option seemed impossible. He could not communicate with Earth. He could not destroy the research without being caught. He could not even guarantee his sabotage would be enough to make the weapons fail. But he could do one thing. He could make the consortium's own people question the research. Over the next week, Hyunwoo carefully cultivated relationships with the Veltaran researchers. He learned their names, their specializations, their concerns. Several of them were clearly uncomfortable with the mortality rates, even before his improvements. They had become researchers to advance knowledge, not to develop weapons. He started asking them questions. Innocent questions about Veltaran ethics, about their scientific codes of conduct, about what they thought happened to test subjects after the assessments were complete. He never stated his concerns directly. He just planted seeds of doubt and let them grow. One researcher, younger than the others and with lighter chitin plates, started spending more time talking to him. Its name was something Hyunwoo could not pronounce, so he called it Resh in his mind. Resh asked questions about human culture, about Earth, about why Hyunwoo had been captured. I was hauling medical supplies to a refugee station, Hyunwoo told it one day. Your patrol ship intercepted me in neutral space. They said I violated territorial boundaries, but the coordinates they gave were inside what the Galactic Council recognizes as neutral zone. That is concerning, Resh said, mandibles clicking slowly. Our briefing stated all test subjects were captured legitimately within Consortium territory. Were they? Hyunwoo pulled up files on his terminal. I have access to the capture reports. 47 human subjects. 32 were taken in disputed space. 8 were captured during raids on civilian vessels. Only 7 were actually in Consortium territory, and those were responding to distress signals that turned out to be traps. Resh looked at the data for a long time. This is not what we were told. We were informed all subjects volunteered for research in exchange for early release. I did not volunteer. Did any of the subjects you tested tell you they volunteered? Silence. Resh's mandibles stopped clicking entirely. Hyunwoo pressed his advantage. The tests are designed to kill, not to study. The data is being used for military applications, not academic research. And the subjects are prisoners, not volunteers. Does that align with Veltaran ethical standards for scientific research? No, Resh said quietly. It does not. Then what are you going to do about it? Resh looked at him with those compound eyes, each lens reflecting a different angle of Hyunwoo's face. I do not know, but I will think about what you have said. 2 days later, Resh requested a formal review of the research program's ethical compliance. 3 other young researchers joined the request. Tikresh was forced to respond, defending the program to an internal review board. The review did not shut down the program. But it slowed things down, required more documentation, added oversight. Every delay was time Hyunwoo could use to sabotage more data. As the guards escorted him away, Hyunwoo looked back at the assessment chamber. The Mai Hyunwoo woke up in a different cell. It was cleaner than the holding area, with a real bed instead of a metal bench. Medical equipment lined one wall, monitoring devices beeping softly. His body ached everywhere, but he was alive. That was becoming a surprisingly low bar for success. Ji-won was in the bed next to his, still unconscious but stable. Her vital signs displayed on a monitor above her head. Oxygen saturation was climbing back to normal levels. She would be okay. The door opened. Tikresh entered alone, without guards. That was new. "You are recovering adequately," the creature said. It was not a question. "Your medical technology is efficient." Hyunwoo sat up slowly, ignoring his protesting muscles. "Why am I in isolation?" "Because I wish to speak with you without the oversight of my colleagues." Tikresh moved closer, compound eyes studying Hyunwoo with an intensity that was unnerving. "You have survived 2 assessments that killed 18 other subjects. You have modified our equipment, breached containment protocols, and critiqued our experimental methodology. This is not normal behavior for test subjects. Maybe your other test subjects were too busy dying to offer feedback." The clicking sound. Definitely amusement. Your species has a tendency toward sarcasm even under extreme stress. "This is documented in our files, but you specifically display an unusual combination of traits: engineering knowledge, rapid problem assessment, willingness to risk yourself for other subjects." Why Hyunwoo considered lying, considered saying nothing, but Tikresh seemed genuinely curious rather than threatening, and curiosity could be useful. "I am a cargo hauler. I spend months in space on ships that break down constantly. Equipment fails, life support glitches, hull seals crack. You learn to fix problems fast or you die. It is not heroism. It is just pattern recognition and basic engineering. Yet you saved the female human at significant personal risk. Ji-won. Her name is Ji-won." Hyunwoo met those compound eyes directly. "And yes, I saved her. Because she is a person, not a test subject. Because leaving someone to die when you can help is not something I am capable of doing." Tikresh was silent for a long moment. Then it set its datapad on the table beside Hyunwoo's bed. "I have a proposal. The next assessment is scheduled in 2 days. It will involve exposure to atmospheric toxins. The mortality rate for this test is projected at 93%. Sounds efficient. The efficiency is the problem." Tikresh made a gesture that might have been frustration. "I have been conducting these assessments for 3 cycles. The mortality rates are so high that we gather minimal useful data before subjects expire. My supervisors are growing impatient with the lack of results. If this continues, the program will be shut down and I will be reassigned." Hyunwoo stared at the creature. "You're asking me to help you kill people more slowly? I am asking you to help me design tests that do not rely on faulty equipment and poor methodology. You have criticized our work, repeatedly. Now I am offering you the opportunity to improve it. And if I refuse, then you will be placed in assessment chamber Gamma in 2 days with the other subjects. You will be exposed to a toxin cocktail designed to induce system failure in carbon-based life forms. You will likely die. The female human will also be tested. She will certainly die. It was not a threat." Tikresh stated it as simple fact, the way someone might mention rain in the forecast. That made it worse somehow. Hyunwoo closed his eyes. His grandmother had taught him that every choice mattered, that you could not control what happened to you, but you could control how you responded. Right now his options were to die on principle or to help his captor and possibly save lives. It was not really a choice at all. "If I help you, Ji-won stays safe. No more tests for her." "Agreed. And I want access to all your previous test data. Everything. I need to see what actually killed your subjects versus what you think killed them." Tikresh hesitated. Then it nodded, mandibles clicking in agreement. "You will have access. But you will work under supervision. And if you attempt sabotage, the agreement is void." "Fine." Hyunwoo opened his eyes. "Show me your terrible science and I will try to make it less lethal. But I want to be clear about something. I am not doing this for you. I am doing this because every test subject who survives is a person who gets to see another day. That is the only reason I am agreeing. Your motivations are irrelevant. Only results matter." Tikresh picked up its datapad and began entering commands. "You will be moved to a laboratory workspace. Rest now. We begin tomorrow." The next morning, Hyunwoo was escorted to a research lab deep in the station. It was a large room filled with equipment he did not recognize, and data terminals displaying complex biological information. Tikresh was already there, along with several other Velteran researchers who watched Hyunwoo with undisguised hostility. "These are my colleagues," Tikresh said, gesturing with one of its forearms. "They are not pleased that I am consulting with a test subject. You will ignore their disapproval and focus on the work." Hyunwoo was given a data terminal and access to the research files. What he found made him physically ill. The Velteran had been conducting these tests for months. Hundreds of subjects from dozens of species. The mortality rates were staggering. But worse than the deaths was the sloppiness of the data collection. Subjects died from equipment failure, from incorrect dosing, from simple neglect. The actual scientific value was minimal. "This is not research," Hyunwoo said after reading for 3 hours. "This is just systematic killing with notes attached." "That is an emotional assessment, not a factual one," Tikresh replied. "No, it is both." Hyunwoo pulled up a specific test report. "Look at this. Assessment 17. You exposed subjects to a neurotoxin to measure neural resistance. 8 subjects died, but 6 of them died because your air filtration system could not handle the toxin concentration. It built up to lethal levels before the planned exposure time. You were not testing their neural resistance. You were testing whether they could breathe poison." "That is not the same thing," the other researchers muttered among themselves. One spoke up, voice sharp through the translator. "The human does not understand our methods. This is why test subjects should not be consulted on research protocols. The human understands that your methods are killing subjects faster than you can gather data." Hyunwoo shot back. "If you want to test toxin resistance, you need proper environmental controls. You need staged dosing. You need equipment that actually works. Otherwise, you are just wasting lives and learning nothing." Tikresh held up one arm, silencing its colleagues. "The human is correct. Our equipment failures have compromised data integrity in 47% of assessments. If you disagree, review the analysis I have prepared." The lead researcher, larger than Tikresh and with darker chitin plates, leaned over the terminal. After several minutes, its mandibles clicked grudgingly. "The analysis is accurate, but redesigning all assessment protocols will take weeks. We do not have weeks. The next toxin assessment is scheduled in 2 days. Then we focus on that one first," Hyunwoo said. "Show me the toxin you are planning to use and the delivery system." They brought up the specifications. It was even worse than he feared. The toxin cocktail was incredibly lethal, designed to attack multiple biological systems simultaneously. But the delivery system was the same flawed air circulation system that had failed in previous tests. "You cannot use this," Hyunwoo said firmly. "The toxin is unstable in atmospheric conditions. It will break down into secondary compounds that are even more dangerous. You will poison your entire testing chamber, possibly the whole facility. The calculations show the toxin remains stable for the duration of the test," the lead researcher insisted. "Your calculations are wrong." Hyunwoo started pulling up chemical formulas, working through the math. His engineering training had included hazardous materials handling. He knew enough chemistry to recognize a disaster waiting to happen. "Look at this reaction chain. The toxin interacts with standard atmospheric oxygen to produce a highly corrosive compound. Once that starts, it will eat through your containment seals. Then it spreads." He kept working, showing them the cascade of chemical reactions. The Velteran researchers watched in silence as he proved, step by mathematical step, that their next test would likely destroy the assessment chamber and kill everyone in the surrounding sections. Tikresh examined his work carefully. Then it turned to its colleagues. "The human has identified a critical safety failure. If we proceed with the current test design, we risk catastrophic facility damage." "How could we have missed this?" the lead researcher asked, its voice subdued. "Because you are not testing for knowledge," Hyunwoo said quietly. "You are testing to kill. And when death is your goal, you stop looking for the ways things can go wrong. You just assume they will go right until everyone is dead." The lab fell silent except for the soft humming of equipment. The Veltaran researchers looked at each other, mandibles clicking in what might have been embarrassment or concern. Finally, Tikresh spoke. "We need to redesign the toxin assessment completely. The human will consult on safety protocols and equipment requirements. This takes priority over all other work." Over the next 2 days, Hyunwoo worked almost non-stop. He 3 days passed. Hyunwoo spent them mapping the facility in his mind. Since his notebook remained confiscated, Ji-won recovered faster than he did, her medical training giving her insights into what their bodies needed. She taught the remaining test subjects breathing exercises and basic survival tricks through the cell barriers. The reptilian survivor, whose name translated roughly to a series of hisses that Hyunwoo could not pronounce, had earned their respect. It had survived through sheer physical resilience, staying conscious even as its body temperature spiked to lethal levels. Now it watched Hyunwoo with intelligent eyes as if trying to understand what made humans different. New prisoners arrived on the second day. More species, more desperate faces. The Veltaran were not running out of test subjects. Hyunwoo tried talking to the guards. They ignored him. He tried talking to the automated food dispensers. They also ignored him, but at least they provided meals. He tried talking to himself, working through engineering problems in his head to keep his mind sharp. On the morning of the 4th day, the lights shifted red again. "Proceed to assessment chamber beta," Tikresh's voice announced. "Today's evaluation will measure pressure adaptation and rapid environmental transition response." Ji-won looked at Hyunwoo as they filed out of their cells. "Pressure adaptation. That sounds like decompression." "Probably." Hyunwoo glanced at the guards flanking them. They tested heat. Now they want to see what happens when they suck all the air out of the room. "Can you modify this test too?" "I can try." Assessment chamber beta was larger than the first, with individual cells arranged in a circle around a central control column. The walls were thicker, designed to handle pressure differentials. Each cell had a single viewport facing inward and a heavy-duty pressure seal on the door. They were strapped into chairs again. Hyunwoo counted 13 test subjects this time, including himself and Ji-won. The new arrivals looked terrified. They had not yet learned that terror wasted energy. Tikresh appeared at the observation window above them. "This assessment will simulate catastrophic atmospheric failure. Chamber pressure will decrease from standard to near vacuum over a period of 10 minutes. Subjects will be evaluated based on time to unconsciousness and physical trauma response." The lights dropped. A deep hum filled the air as the pressure system activated. Hyunwoo felt his ears pop. The air was already thinning. He looked around his cell quickly, searching for access panels, weak points, anything he could use. But chamber beta was more secure than alpha. The environmental controls were outside the cells, accessible only from the central column. The pressure kept dropping. His chest felt tight. Breathing became difficult, each breath bringing less oxygen. Around the circle, other test subjects were already in distress. One of the new arrivals, a being made mostly of gas held in a containment suit, simply collapsed as its body lost cohesion. Ji-won's cell was across from him. She was pressing her hands against her ears, trying to equalize the pressure. He could see her lips moving, probably counting her breaths, staying focused. The pressure gauge in Hyunwoo's cell showed they were at 60% of normal atmospheric pressure and falling fast. His vision started to tunnel. Blood rushed in his ears. He had maybe 3 minutes before unconsciousness, then he heard it. A small sound, barely audible over the hum of the pressure system. A hissing noise coming from the seal on his cell door. The seal was failing. Hyunwoo forced himself to think through the hypoxia that was clouding his mind. A failing seal meant the pressure in his cell was dropping faster than intended. He would die before the test ended. But a failing seal also meant structural weakness. He staggered out of his chair, legs barely supporting him. The room spun. He made it to the door and examined the seal. It was a standard magnetic compression seal, designed to hold against pressure differentials. But it was old, or poorly maintained, and the gasket was tearing. If his seal was failing, others might be too. Hyunwoo looked at the central control column. Then he looked at Ji-won's cell. The cells were connected through a maintenance crawl space that ran beneath the floor. He had noticed it when they entered, a small access hatch in the corner of each cell. His hands were shaking. His lungs screamed for air that was not there, but he dropped to his knees and pried open the access hatch. Behind it, a narrow tunnel barely wide enough for a human body. Pipes and conduits ran along the walls. He had no time to think about claustrophobia. He crawled into the tunnel. The air here was slightly denser, trapped in the maintenance space. It bought him seconds of clarity. He could see other access hatches along the tunnel, each one leading to a different cell. G1's cell was 4 hatches away. He crawled, his body moving on pure determination. His vision grayed at the edges. His heartbeat stuttered. But he kept moving. He reached her access hatch and forced it open. G1's cell was in worse shape than his. Her viewport had cracked and air was rushing out even faster. She was slumped in her chair, unconscious. Hyunwoo pulled himself into her cell. The pressure difference made his ears scream with pain. He grabbed G1 and dragged her to the access hatch. Getting an unconscious person through a narrow tunnel was nearly impossible, but impossible just meant it had not been done yet. He wedged himself into the tunnel first, then pulled her in after him. The maintenance space was equalizing with the cells now, pressure dropping everywhere, but it was still buying them seconds. Seconds to get back to his cell, where the failing seal might actually save them. The crawl back felt like it took hours. In reality, it was probably less than a minute. Hyunwoo's body was shutting down, running on reserves that should not exist, but humans were good at finding impossible reserves when they needed them. He pulled Ji-won into his cell and kicked the access hatch closed. Then he turned his attention to the failing door seal. If he could make it fail faster in a controlled way, he could equalize the pressure between his cell and the corridor outside. The corridor was not at vacuum. The guards needed to breathe too. He grabbed the edge of the seal gasket and pulled. The material tore. Air rushed in through the gap, precious oxygen from the corridor outside. He wedged his belt into the tear, forcing it wider. The seal screamed as it failed completely. The pressure equalized with a thunderous bang. Air flooded the cell. Hyunwoo collapsed next to Ji-won, both of them gasping like drowning victims who had just broken the surface. Alarms were blaring. The test had gone wrong. The observation window was full of panicking researchers. Tikresh was gesturing frantically at the guards. The other cells were still at near vacuum. Through his viewport, Hyunwoo could see the other test subjects. Most were unconscious. At least 3 were clearly dead. The guards rushed in. The pressure system shut down. The cell doors opened. Medical teams flooded the chamber. Hyunwoo was pulled to his feet again. His body felt like it was made of lead. Ji-won was loaded onto a stretcher, still unconscious but breathing. That was what mattered. She was breathing. Tikresh appeared in front of him. The creature's mandibles were clicking so rapidly it sounded like static. You compromised the test integrity. You breached your cell and contaminated the isolated environment. I saved her life, Hyunwoo interrupted. His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper, but he put steel into it. Your seal was failing. Faulty equipment. I adapted to survive. Is that not what you are testing? The test was designed to measure tolerance to pressure loss, not problem-solving capability. Then your test design is still garbage. Hyunwoo coughed, tasting blood. That seal was installed incorrectly. The gasket compression was uneven. It was going to fail whether I touched it or not. I just controlled the failure instead of dying from it. Other Veltaran researchers had gathered now, listening. One of them spoke up, voice translated through the ceiling speakers. The human is correct. I am reviewing the chamber logs. Cell 7 seal showed stress fractures before the test began. It would have catastrophically failed within 6 minutes. Tikresh turned to look at its colleague. You are certain? Completely. The human identified a critical equipment failure that we missed. If the seal had failed explosively, it could have damaged the entire pressure system. The test was compromised before it began. A long silence filled the corridor. The medical teams continued working on the unconscious subjects. 3 body bags were brought out. The new arrivals who had not survived. Finally, Tikresh looked back at Hyunwoo. You identified our equipment failure. You also accessed the maintenance system and rescued another subject. Both actions were outside test parameters. Both actions were necessary for survival, Hyunwoo said. Your parameters do not account for intelligent response. You are testing us like we are simple organisms reacting to stimulus. But we are not. We think we adapt, we survive. And you believe our methodology should account for this? I believe if you want useful data, you should stop designing tests that kill your subjects through incompetence rather than controlled variables. Another silence. Then Tikresh made that clicking sound again. It was definitely approval, or amusement. Hyunwoo could not tell which, and right now he did not care. Take them to medical, Tikresh ordered. Full recovery protocols. The human male is not to be tested again until I give explicit approval. The heat was becoming unbearable. Hyunwoo's shirt clung to his back, soaked through with sweat. The air tasted thin and metallic, each breath requiring more effort than the last. Around him, the cell walls shimmered with rising thermal distortion. Through the transparent barrier, he watched the other test subjects. The crystalline being was glowing bright orange now, internal structures visible as the heat built up inside its body. Steam rose from the amphibious creatures as their skin began to dry out. One of the reptilians had stopped moving entirely, its body flat against the floor. Jiwon's cell was directly in his line of sight. She had stripped down to her undershirt and was pressed into the corner, breathing in short, rapid gasps. Her face was bright red, and even from this distance Hyunwoo could see she was struggling. The temperature gauge on the wall read 48 degrees Celsius and climbing. Hyunwoo forced himself to focus. Panic used oxygen. Panic clouded thinking. He needed his mind clear. His restraints had a quick release mechanism for emergencies, probably so the guards could extract bodies quickly. He triggered it with a twist of his wrist and slid out of the chair. The floor burned through his shoes. He moved quickly to the maintenance panel he had spotted earlier, dropping to his knees. The panel was sealed but not locked. The Veltaran clearly had not expected their test subjects to be mechanically inclined. He pried it open with his belt buckle. Behind it, a nest of wiring and a compact control unit. This was the environmental control for his specific cell. Temperature regulation, atmospheric composition, everything. But the system was crude, designed for simple on-off functionality rather than precision. That was their first mistake. Hyunwoo traced the power lines with his finger, careful not to touch the live wires. The heating elements were running at maximum, drawing power through a main relay. But the relay itself was producing heat, and it was positioned near several other sensitive components. Poor design. The whole system was creating inefficient hotspots instead of even heat distribution. He could not stop the test. The controls were locked from the outside, but he could change how the heat moved through the cell. Using the metal edge of his belt buckle, he carefully shorted out the relay. Sparks flew. The heating element shut down for 3 seconds, then rebooted on a backup circuit. But now the power flow was different, less concentrated. The hotspots began to even out. The temperature was still rising, but more slowly. More importantly, it was now rising evenly. That meant he could identify the coolest spots in the cell and use them. Hyunwoo looked up at the observation window. Tikeresh stood there with several other researchers watching with those unblinking compound eyes. They would have noticed his tampering. He expected guards to rush in and stop him, but nothing happened. They were just watching. Taking notes, that was interesting. Hyunwoo moved to the transparent wall facing Jiwon's cell. She had slid down to the floor now, her breathing dangerously shallow. He banged on the barrier to get her attention. When she looked up, eyes unfocused, he started gesturing. He pointed to the corner of her cell where the ventilation intake was located. Airflow meant slightly lower temperature. Then he mimed lying flat on the floor, spreading out body mass. Better heat dissipation. Finally, he pointed to his own throat and took slow, deliberate breaths. Conserve oxygen. Stay calm. Jiwon stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. She crawled to the corner he had indicated and lay flat, controlling her breathing. Within minutes, her color started to improve slightly. The temperature reached 55 degrees. The crystalline being shattered. The sound was like a bomb going off, sharp and sudden. The pieces of its body scattered across its cell floor, smoking. The Veltaran researchers made notes on their datapads. One of the reptilians stopped breathing. Then another. The amphibious creatures were making sounds that might have been screaming, their skin cracking in the dry heat. Hyunwoo felt his vision starting to blur. His head pounded. Every breath felt like inhaling fire, but his modification had bought him time. The heat in his cell had plateaued at 54 degrees instead of continuing to climb. 1 degree difference. It might be enough. He pressed himself against the floor in the coolest corner and focused on breathing. In. Out. Steady. Controlled. His grandmother had taught him meditation techniques when he was young. He had always thought they were nonsense. Now they might save his life. Time became strange. Seconds felt like hours. His body screamed at him to panic, to move, to do something. He ignored it. He had spent years in cargo ship engine rooms, where the temperature could spike without warning. He knew heat. He knew how to outlast it. Through half-closed eyes, he watched Ji-won. She was still conscious, still breathing. That was good. That meant his instructions had helped. The temperature gauge hit 60 degrees. Hyunwoo felt consciousness starting to slip away. His last thought was that this was a really stupid way to die. Then the temperature started dropping. The change was sudden. Cool air rushed through the vents. The lights in the cells shifted from red to blue. Hyunwoo lay on the floor, unable to move as his body slowly remembered how to function in survivable conditions. Assessment complete, Tikaresh's voice announced. Extracting survivors for medical evaluation. The cell doors opened. Guards entered, checking the subjects. Some cells they bypassed entirely. Those prisoners were clearly dead. Others received immediate medical attention. Hyunwoo was pulled to his feet and half carried out of the chamber. He was placed on a medical table in a bright white room. A Veltaran medic examined him with instruments that beeped and hummed. Ji-won was on a table next to him, an oxygen mask over her face. She turned her head and met his eyes. She was crying, but she was alive. Fascinating, Tikaresh said, appearing beside Hyunwoo's table. The creature leaned down, compound eyes reflecting Hyunwoo's exhausted face 100 times over. You modified your environmental controls. Your cell temperature was 1.3 degrees lower than intended. This variance kept you conscious 7 minutes longer than our models predicted. Hyunwoo's throat was too dry to speak. He just stared at the creature. The female human also survived beyond projections. You communicated strategy to her through the barriers. Tikaresh made a clicking sound that might have been approval or curiosity. Problem-solving under extreme duress. Altruistic behavior despite resource scarcity. These are interesting data points. The creature pulled out a data pad and began entering notes. Initial assessment results. Crystalline species has catastrophic structural failure at 56 degrees Celsius. Reptilian species enters cardiac arrest at 53 degrees. Amphibious species experiences fatal dehydration at 49 degrees. But human species, Tikaresh looked at Hyunwoo again. Human species modifies the test environment and shares survival strategies. Unexpected, very unexpected. Your test design is garbage, Hyunwoo croaked. His voice was barely a whisper, but he put every ounce of contempt he could manage into it. Inefficient heat distribution. Dangerous relay positioning. The whole system could have exploded. Tikaresh tilted its head. The system performed within acceptable parameters. Acceptable for killing people. Terrible for actual science. Hyunwoo coughed and the Veltaran medic gave him water. He drank it slowly, then continued. You want to test heat tolerance? Fine, but your methodology is sloppy. Those hotspots could have killed us in 5 minutes instead of 15. You would have gotten useless data. The room went silent. The other Veltaran researchers had stopped working to stare at him. A test subject was criticizing their experimental design. It was probably not something that happened often. Tikaresh's mandibles clicked together rapidly. You are suggesting our research methods are flawed? I'm stating a fact. You almost lost valuable test subjects due to equipment malfunction disguised as a controlled experiment. Hyunwoo closed his eyes. If you are going to torture us, at least do it competently. He expected punishment. Expected to be dragged back to his cell or worse. Instead, Tikaresh made that clicking sound again, louder this time. Interesting, the creature said. Very interesting indeed. Take them back to holding. Full rations. They have earned rest before the next assessment. As the guards carried him out, Hyunwoo caught one last glimpse of the assessment chamber. Workers were already cleaning out the cells, removing bodies, preparing for the next test. 6 prisoners had entered those cells. Only 2 humans and 1 extremely hardy reptilian had emerged alive. Hyunwoo wondered what the next test would be. Then he wondered if he really wanted to know. The holding cell smelled like fear and disinfectant. Hyunwoo sat on the metal bench with his back against the wall, watching the other prisoners pace in panic. 12 different species, all crammed into adjacent cells along a curved corridor that reminded him of old prison ships from Earth history vids. The walls were clean but cold, and the blue lighting made everyone look slightly sick. He pulled out his notebook. It was small, bound in synthetic leather, and had survived 3 star systems and 1 cargo vessel explosion. Now it would document whatever came next. Hyunwoo started sketching the corridor layout, noting the ventilation grates and the position of the guard station. Are you actually taking notes right now? The voice came from the cell to his left. A young woman with short hair pressed against the transparent barrier between them. Her jumpsuit identified her as medical personnel. Seemed like a good time, Hyunwoo said without looking up. I count 6 cameras, 3 ventilation points, and 1 very bored guard who checks his datapad every 4 minutes. The woman laughed, but it had an edge to it. I'm Ji-won. I was with a research team studying plant adaptation on Kepler 442b. We were loading samples when these insect things just appeared and grabbed us. Hyunwoo. Cargo hauler. Wrong place, wrong time. He finally looked at her. She was younger than him, maybe late 20s, with the kind of steady hands that came from medical training. Her eyes were red from crying, but she was holding herself together. You okay? No, but pretending helps. Ji-won glanced down the corridor where the guards stood. They were tall, maybe 7 feet, with segmented bodies covered in chitinous plates, 4 arms each, compound eyes that never seemed to blink. Do you know what they want with us? Before Hyunwoo could answer, the corridor lights shifted from blue to harsh white. A door at the far end opened with a pneumatic hiss, and one of the insectoid beings entered. This one wore something that might have been a lab coat if lab coats had 6 sleeves. It carried a datapad and moved with the kind of precise efficiency that Hyunwoo associated with people who had done the same task 1,000 times. I am Tikaresh, the creature said. Its voice came through speakers mounted in the ceiling, translated into flat, emotionless Korean. You have been selected for environmental compatibility assessment. Your participation will advance our understanding of biological stress tolerances across multiple species, classifications. A massive crystalline being in the cell across from Hyunwoo slammed, its limbs against the barrier. The impact made a sound like breaking glass. This is illegal under 17 different Galactic Council regulations. You cannot... The Galactic Council has no jurisdiction in Velter in space, Tikaresh interrupted. You entered our territory. You are now research subjects. The assessments will begin in 6 hours. Use this time to rest. The creature turned and left. The door sealed behind it with a sound that felt very final. The corridor erupted in noise. The crystalline being kept hitting the barrier. Several reptilian creatures in the far cells started making distress calls that sounded like steam escaping from pipes. 2 amphibious beings just curled into balls and stopped moving. Ji-won looked at Hyunwoo. Environmental compatibility assessment. That's a fancy way of saying, they're going to try to kill us, Hyunwoo finished. He said it calmly, like he was reading a shipping manifest. Different environments, different stresses. They want to see what breaks us. And you're still taking notes? Hyunwoo shrugged. Helps me think. He was sketching Tikaresh now, trying to remember the placement of its eyes, the way its mandibles moved when it spoke. 6 hours is a long time. That guard has already checked his datapad twice since our friend in the lab coat left. The ventilation system cycles every 12 minutes. The floor has a slight grade toward the drainage port in the center, which means they hose down this corridor regularly. Why does any of that matter? Don't know yet, but information is never useless. He looked at her seriously. You're a medic, right? What can you tell me about the others? Ji-won blinked, then seemed to understand. She turned to study the other prisoners. The crystalline being is showing fracture lines along its base. Stress fractures, probably from the capture. Those reptilian ones are cold-blooded, judging by how they're clustering near the heating vent. The amphibious ones need moisture, and this air is way too dry for them. They'll be in trouble soon. Good. Keep watching them. If these tests are about environmental stress, the ones already compromised will fail first. Hyunwoo turned a page in his notebook, which means we can predict what's coming based on who they're targeting. That's cold, that's practical. I'm not trying to be cruel, Ji-won, but if we know what's coming, we can prepare, and if we prepare, we survive. The hours crawled past. The guard changed twice. Hyunwoo filled 6 pages with observations. Ji-won dozed for a while, then woke up and started teaching him basic first aid techniques through the barrier. The other prisoners gradually quieted down, exhaustion replacing panic. When the lights shifted again, this time from white to red, everyone tensed. The doors to each cell opened simultaneously. Beyond them stood more guards, and beyond the guards, a massive chamber with observation windows running along one wall. Proceed to assessment chamber Alpha, Tikresh's voice said through the speakers. Resistance will result in immediate termination. The prisoners filed out. Hyunwoo caught Ji-won's eye as they moved. She looked terrified, but she nodded at him. Whatever came next, they would face it. The assessment chamber was divided into individual sealed cells, each transparent, each containing a single chair with restraints. The observation windows above showed rows of Veltaran researchers, their compound eyes glittering in the red light. As the guard strapped him into his chair, Hyunwoo looked around his cell. Metal walls, no visible vents, a small panel in the corner that probably controlled environmental settings. He committed it all to memory. His notebook was gone, taken by the guards, but that was fine. He had always been good at remembering the important details. Across the chamber, he could see Jiwon in her cell. Beyond her, the crystalline being, the reptilians, the amphibious creatures, all of them waiting. Tikresh appeared at the observation window, looking down at them like a scientist studying insects under glass. Which Hyunwoo supposed was exactly what they were to it. Beginning environmental assessment in 60 seconds, the creature announced. Current test, atmospheric stress response. Subjects will experience progressive temperature elevation combined with oxygen depletion. Survival time will be recorded for analysis. Hyunwoo felt the air in his cell begin to warm. He closed his eyes, forcing himself to breathe slowly and steadily. His engineering training kicked in. If they were heating the air, they needed heating elements. Elements needed power. Power meant wiring. Wiring meant access panels. He opened his eyes and started looking for the weak points in his cage. Somewhere in this cell there was a way to take control. There always was. You just had to know where to look. The temperature climbed higher. Across the chamber, the crystalline being started to glow, heat building up in its structure. The reptilians were lying flat, trying to disperse the thermal load. Hyunwoo spotted the panel. Corner low, probably a maintenance access point. He smiled just a little. Time to get to work.